Hello everyone. This is not a story for the faint of heart. Today, we will be stepping into the darkness of the most gruesome cases, where evil not only exists, but also leaves bloody and haunting traces. This is Real Gruesome Murder Cases, a series of true stories about murders that made the whole world shudder. If you are ready to face the cold truth in the gruesome corners of humanity, come with me to delve deeper into each case. Murder in a Dream. Halvar sat in his office, browsing the police file of suspects and cursing his brain for not remembering anything regarding the incident. The doctors told him the blow to his head was severe. It gave him a concussion, after all, and that it might take time for his memory to come back. If it did at all. Hall, without turning his eyes from the computer screen, he waved a hand. "Come in, Siegfried." His assistant walked into the office, placing a hand on Halvar's shoulder. "How are you? Still can't remember anything," he said, scanning the faces of every known criminal in Norway. He recognized a few of them, having captured them himself, but none rang a bell as to whom might have killed two of his friends and placed one in a coma. "He's got to be here somewhere." "Hall, you should rest," Siegfried said, placing a cup on his desk. Steam rose from it, spreading an invigorating scent of coffee. "We are looking into every possible avenue. I have to regain my memory," he said, scrolling further. He had to. It was the only way. He must have seen the killer just before the hit on the head knocked him out cold. His mind held the only real evidence they had, the only evidence to help turn suspicion off of Halvar himself. Siegfried sighed and retracted her hand. "We talked to Olaf, the studio owner, again. He said he left the place early that evening and didn't see anyone but you and your friends coming in. Nobody else was scheduled for practice either. The single security camera caught no one else entering the building." "That camera's position is awkward," Halvar said, rubbing his eyes. He hadn't slept in a day. He didn't like what sleep brought. The killer could have entered through the back or by the window. "Did Olaf tell you about his back door? How he's too cheap to have it repaired? Anyone could enter. In fact, could the man himself be responsible? He did complain often about the noise of Halvar and his band playing, even though they paid to rent his studio for practice." "Hall, I can't imagine how hard this must be for you. I know how close you were with them, how much music meant to you. I hope that Bjarka makes it, and I hope you get some rest." Halvar sighed and listened to Siegfrieda's footsteps leaving the office. The cup of coffee rested on the desk, smelling heavenly. He turned to say thank you, but his assistant was gone. Instead, he noticed the pictures on the office walls, his formal detective license, a photo with the whole police department for Christmas 2 years ago, and a framed picture of him and his 3 friends playing live at a local festival. 2 of them were dead now. 1 in a coma. The result of some lunatic bursting into the studio killing everybody. Halvar himself survived by sheer luck, it would seem. I'll find out who did this, he thought, turning back to the screen. And no law or moral code can save them from me when I do. He spent the rest of the night searching through the files, as well as his memory, both seemingly void of the information he sought. Eventually, sleep caught up with Halvar, and with it came the nightmare. Each night since the incident, he had been having roughly the same dream. It was almost as if his mind was trying to tell him through dreams what he couldn't remember consciously. Halvar got to relive the murder of his friends every night for the past 2 weeks. He got to see every bloody detail, but never the killer's face. That detail always eluded him, and with each dream, he thought he was getting closer to the truth. Each time, the nightmare would reveal a bit more of what happened. That was if his mind wasn't just making everything up out of trauma. In the dream, he was often in the killer's shoes, after all. But he could never see his face. This night, the dream started as usual. Right in the middle of it, and from the point of view of the killer. Halvar saw himself as the murderer, picking up his guitar and crushing his friend's head with it. They were in the middle of practice and were stunned at the sudden outburst of violence by the intruding killer. Before anyone could react, Halvar smashed the heads of all 3 of his band colleagues with his own guitar. Then the dream shifted, where he could see outside from himself. How he got hit on the head too, by a figure without a face. The prosecutor then ran away, and when Halvar wanted to follow, the figure disappeared into the shadows. Halvar woke up, sweating and breathing heavily. He looked around and noticed he had fallen asleep in his office. The place was dark, no light coming from the hallway. Everyone must have left already. He grabbed a pen and paper and wrote down everything he could remember from the dream, recording every detail. The drawer by his desk was filled with accounts from his dream, and he used them to correlate the event, searching for consistent patterns and hints. As incredible as it seemed, his dreams were the only clues he had. But he couldn't share them with his colleagues. They would never take it seriously. The killer used my guitar, Halvar murmured, comparing tonight's dream with the others. But the last thing I remember was playing on my guitar. Then, nothing. So, whoever did it, I must have trusted them to let them have my guitar. The evidence found at the crime scene clearly pointed at Halvar's guitar as the murder weapon. It had blood and tissue of all 4 of them on its body, all found on one side, suggesting that the killer used it as a club to repeatedly strike at each one. The guitar's body was solid steel and hard plastic, and it cracked under the brutal hits, but did not break apart, surprisingly. So the killer must have known how strong the instrument was, so he could perform precise strike with it and not have it break in the middle of his assault. That would create an opening for the others to defend themselves. The only person that Halvar would entrust his instrument to, and who would know so much about it, other than his band friends, was Olaf himself, the studio owner. Halvar even once took lessons from the man, who showed him a few tricks on the guitar from his heyday as a roadie. It wasn't rational to think that Bjarka would take the guitar, kill the other two, attempt to kill Halvar, and then knock himself out. How would he do that? And it was just as absurd to think that Halvar himself did it, as was the unspoken suspicion. How would he swing the guitar at himself, knocking himself out with it? The angles didn't match, but the blood and the concussion did. Somebody else must have been present there that night, and the more Halvar thought about it, the more he suspected Olaf. The studio was his. He had access to the camera. The band knew and trusted him. He did complain about the noise, but was that reason enough to attempt a quadruple homicide? Or was there something else? A form of jealousy against Halvar and the band? Olaf did say that he never had a chance to be in a band, but that it was his greatest wish. Halvar checked the clock. It was something past 3 a.m. He considered, looking at the photo of him and his friends. Then he left his office. Olaf's house was next to his studio. It was part of the same building complex, just on the other side, so the owner had privacy as well as quick access to the place. Halvar sat in his car, parked outside the man's house. There was a light turned on inside. Olaf was the one that found us, Halvar thought. He came into the studio and called the police. In the report, the man said he had heard shouts and how the music suddenly stopped, so he had gone to check. The more Halvar considered, the more sense it made. The man pretended to have stumbled upon the murder scene, to have an alibi. Halvar waited in his car, considering whether he should confront the man, considering if he could even do it. As he waited outside of Olaf's house, the pain in his head from the blow returned. Halvar took some painkillers and watched the window, wanting to catch Olaf in some act that would rat him out. In a whirlwind of thoughts, and with a headache pounding, Halvar must have fallen in a pill-induced sleep, as suddenly his mind was back at the incident. This time, he saw more of it. "That sounds terrible, Hal," Bjarka said, grimacing on the drums. "Are you sure you can play the guitar, mate?" Halvar ignored the remark and focused on playing the solo. They were working on a new song, and it was a pain to get it right. "Sounds to me like he's butchering somebody," Damus, the bassist, commented. "Must be the stress at work, I reckon." They laughed. Typical guy talk. Halvar tried his best, but failed. His fingers were just too slow. The solo too technical and complex. His mind was sluggish, indeed from stress at work. There was a dangerous killer on the loose, and they had finally gotten a lead. Halvar just wanted to relax and let go for a few hours with his buddies. But all he could think of was the brutality of the recent murders. "Hey, we're going to get something to eat," Bjarka said. "You want something, Hal?" "No," Halvar said. "I'm good." He just wanted to get the damn solo right. "All right then," Bjarka said. "But don't you try and steal my rolls when we come back." They left. Halvar kept practicing. Then Olaf entered the studio. "Hey, mate," the older man said, wearing his long gray hair in a tail. "Sound like you're having some trouble." "Yeah," Halvar said. "I can't do this transition here. It's too fast for me." Halvar showed what he meant by playing the part at half speed. Olaf nodded. "I see. Can I try?" "Sure," Halvar sighed. He handed the man his guitar. "Knock yourself out." "I'll knock you out with my veteran skill," the man said, and took the guitar. The dream then changed to Halvar being in the killer's shoes and butchering everybody, until seeing himself in third person again, being hit by some man with no face. Halvar ran after the man, and this time he caught him in a corner. The man had long hair. Halvar jolted awake. He was sitting in his car, parked outside of Olaf's home. The light in the house had turned off. "It's him," he thought, breathing heavily. He did it. Halvar got out of the car and walked to the studio entrance. He had the key, as he and his friends were regulars. It was the little hours of the morning, and there was nobody outside, not even a stray dog. Halvar unlocked the door and removed the police tape, entering the crime scene. He knew that the studio and Olaf's house were connected by a passage for practicality. Halvar used the light on his phone to make his way through the dark interior. If it really was you, Olaf? Halvar hurried through the passage, entering the man's living quarters. He'd been there once or twice when Olaf invited them over for a drink. Building his alibi, plotting even then, Halvar crossed the living room and climbed the stairs to the man's bedroom. He didn't think of what his plan was. He just wanted to have a look at the man, to see his murderous face. As he came to the bedroom, where he saw the light coming before, Halvar paused. He heard weeping from inside. His heart pounded like a drum, and he burst into the room. "Feeling guilt for what you did?" The man, lying under the blankets, jumped up in shock. Halvar turned on the light and noticed he had taken out his gun on instinct. Olaf gazed at him with wide eyes, red, as if from crying. "What? Don't deny it. You did it!" Halvar shouted, his hand trembling. "I saw you. It was you." The man's face was twisted in a mixture of shock and fear. "What are you talking about?" "I saw you in my dream," Halvar said. "You took my guitar, and..." The man was crying. There were candles placed on his windowsill, alongside pictures of Halvar and his friends. The two that had been killed had a rosary around them. He was grieving. What's all this? Halvar asked, pointing at the pictures. They were my friends too, Olaf said. Your band reminded me of when I was young. His gaze focused on the gun in Halvar's hands. You think I did it. It wasn't a question, but a statement. One in which Halvar wasn't so sure anymore. He looked into the man's eyes and saw sadness underneath all the shock and betrayal. I can't prove it, Hall, Olaf said, sniffing. But by God, I'm not the man you should be pointing that gun at. Who then? Halvar shouted. Who did it? Who killed my friends and nearly killed me? He pointed the gun at the man's head. Olaf began weeping. The guitar was in your hands when I found you. Yes, the killer wanted to confuse the forensics by framing one of us. No one else came or left the studio. Hall, what are you saying? Olaf glanced at the gun again, then at Halvar. Are you here to kill me too? Halvar balked. Olaf pissed himself, a dark spot appearing on the bed sheets. The man was genuinely afraid of him. Halvar suddenly felt deep shame, and he lowered the gun, running out of the room and out of the house. No, it can't be, he thought. If Olaf didn't do it, who then? He started the car and drove back home, where he took a bottle of scotch and began drinking. He demanded from his mind to remember all of it, to remember things clearly, without dreams and illusions. His head began hurting, but he didn't take the pills. They would only distract his mind. Halvar emptied the bottle and paced around his room until he collapsed in a corner and wept for his friends. Once again, sleep took over, his body and mind exhausted. This time, the dream picked off as his friends returned with the food. Where have you been? Halvar asked. They were gone for nearly 2 hours. Bjarka giggled like a schoolgirl. We went to get food. They all had red faces and were snickering like teenagers. Have you been smoking weed? No, Damus said. They snickered some more. Halvar sighed. We were supposed to practice tonight. You should chill, Detective Oyolf, their lead singer said. You can't play that guitar anyway. He turned to the other two. Hey, maybe we should cut his hair. If he can't play, then he's not a true metal fan and shouldn't have long hair. The three laughed, obviously talking gibberish, but Halvar, being frustrated by his stressful job, having to deal with murderers and psychopaths all day long, just wanted to lose himself in the music with his friends. But for some reason, couldn't get the creative juices flowing, and had enough. Something snapped. He grabbed his guitar and began playing. The guys turned to him. Whoa, look at Hall. He's on fire. Halvar played the solo with fury. He struck every note on the spot. Yeah, man, that's the thing. Then he came to the hard part. He followed Olaf's instructions and sailed through it, racing to the finale. Seems Hall's been practicing while we were smoking. Halvar's muscles tensed as he got to where he always failed. He struck the notes, one by one, the pick flying over the strings. But his fury was too much. He broke a string, and the guys giggled. Halvar smacked Bjarka straight in his laughing face with the guitar. The man fell over like a chopped log. Then he hit Damus, who was too stoned to register what was going on. Halvar repeatedly hit the man's head until it cracked, and the guitar strings vibrated from the impact, playing a sinister echo. Oilof wanted to run away, but Halvar chopped him down by hitting his side first, and then smashing the man's head. Breathing heavily, feeling all his frustration boiling in him, Halvar screamed and headbanged into the guitar's body repeatedly until he collapsed to the floor, unconscious. The dream shifted outside himself, and he could see Olaf stumbling upon the aftermath. Mortified, Halvar jumped up on his feet as the doorbell rang. His fists were clenched, as though he still held the guitar, and he breathed heavily, confused. He was at home. He just woke up from a dream. Someone was at the door. Did I really kill them? Halvar ran a hand through his sweaty hair and walked to the door. He took one deep breath and opened it. It was Sigfrida, with two other officers by her side, Halvar's colleagues. Hall? She said, her voice painful. Yeah? He groaned. Bjarka woke up. We have some questions. The murder of Presi Bavver. The Blauevmans County Police Station was a horrible place for officers and criminals alike. The station had been built in 1932, and to most everyone's sadness, had been one of the only buildings to hold up during the Second World War. The station was built from old, withering bricks, and the man who was in charge of keeping the ivy along the sides of the building contained was too busy hitting on women to actually get the job done. The inside was even worse. The oak doors were creaky on their rusty hinges, and the musty concrete jail cells were cracking due to the recent heat surge the Netherlands were experiencing. The small cubicles for officers were tight, and the air conditioning rarely worked. To make things worse, the computer system was terrible. Sometimes, officers would sit for hours just to wait for a 12-page document to load. It didn't help that Blauevmans was a city in the middle of the mountains, away from most metropolitan. Just getting into the next county took 2 hours. The only good thing that had happened to the police station in the past month was that the exterminator had came. The rats were gone, and they wouldn't be back. But from where Evian van Beek was sitting, she swore she saw a rat scurry past the chief of police's office as she and Lucas Hoysk waited to be called in for questioning. Evi tapped her feet on the wooden floors, anxiously looking around. The police station was crowded for a Sunday night. Some officers were packing up to leave for the night. Others cursed as their computers failed to upload their files. It looked like one of the cops, Sergeant Shea, was having a small party. Evi leaned over her seat watching some of the officers chat and shove forkfuls of red velvet cake into their mouths. Maybe a birthday? Evi slouched back into her chair and sighed. Lucas bit his lip, staring curiously at the ceiling. Evi knew that look. "What denk je wel net?" Evi asked, pushing a dark hair out of her face. Lucas shot Evi an alarmed look. "Evi," he hissed, "talk ahead angles." Evi gave him a puzzled look. They were both studying English as a world language. They were almost fluent. But why practice for the upcoming test when they're in a police station about to get questioned as suspects of a murder? Evi looked around before repeating her question. "What are you thinking about?" Lucas rubbed his strawberry blonde hair. "They can't understand us if we talk in English," he said, his Dutch accent well enunciated. Lucas tilted his head to the side, indicating the officers eating cake behind him. Lucas continued, a worried look on his face. "I know the plan didn't exactly go according to plan." Evi shot Lucas a deadly glare. "Lucas, we killed..." Evi peered over her shoulder, making sure the officers weren't paying any attention to them. She lowered her voice. "Presi. We killed Presi, the mayor's son. But they have no proof it is us. All they saw was the security tapes," Lucas stated, exasperated. "We were running. So what? That could mean we were running away from the murderer." Evi bit her lip. "We did it. We have to confess. If we don't, and they find out it was us, there will be much bigger." "Is it consequences?" Lucas shook his head. "Consequences, you mean? But what if they don't find out it was us? We could lie and be done with this. And what if they do?" Evi hissed loudly, tears sparkling in her eyes. She tugged at the neckline of her purple shirt. "Either way, I do not want to end up in Gevangenis." Lucas frowned. "I'm afraid neither lying nor telling the truth will get you out of jail. At least we have a shot if we lie, but that is not the right thing to do. We could get a worse sentence if they do find out it was us." "Lucas, we killed someone," Evi cried. Small tears began to flow from her blue eyes and stream down her face. Lucas looked over at her helplessly, gritting his teeth. His knuckles were white as they gripped the seat of his chair. "They're going to call us in any minute," Lucas said softly. "So pick your poison." Evie dried her tears, sighing sadly. She looked up and pointed to the chief's door. "Lucas, the chief. Ich kommt heran." Evi gasped. Lucas suddenly looked very worried, but he put on a fierce face. As the chief turned the brass doorknob from the inside, Lucas took a deep breath and whispered, "Let's go, Evi." Barvan de Vries was a tall man with wispy black hair and piercing dark blue eyes. He wore his shiny gold badge proudly and was never without a gun under his sweater. In the work area, he wore his gun on his utility belt. Much to the chief's pleasure, the weapon seemed to intimidate the teenage suspects in front of him. The two according to his files, were seemingly clean, but were the primary suspects for the murder of Presi Bavver, Evian van Beek, and Lucas Hoysk. Chief de Vries's lips curled. This would be fun. The chief put on a menacing face and looked from Lucas to Evi. The girl was fidgeting slightly, almost unsure of what to think. Lucas, however, seemed relatively calm. It was an odd combination of suspects, especially partners in crime. But then, many odd people had entered the Blauwevmans County Police Station. This pair would be no different from the rest. But, the chief thought, odd combinations often have, shall we say, different stories. Barvan tapped his door with his knuckles, his eyes trained on Evi. His first victim. The chief gestured to Evi, whose eyes widened. Evian van Beek? Evi bit her lip. It looked as if the girl was blinking back tears. Ja, she answered. De Vries nodded approvingly. De tide is here. Komen, Evian, the chief said. Clapping his hands, Evi looked desperately at Lucas, and then at the chief. Alsjeblieft, een moment? She asked in a small voice. Lucas gave Evi an alarmed look as the chief processed what the suspect had just said. De Vries scowled, but gave in. Prima, the chief muttered, his eyebrows furrowing. Fine, Evi repeated in English, sighing. She turned to Lucas. I'm telling the truth, she said sternly. It's the right thing to do. Lucas looked angry for a moment, but then softened. His cheeks were red. Fine, he spat. But if we get out of here with no mark on our permanent record, you can thank me. So you are still... Evi stopped, eyes glancing toward Barvan. At least I will have done something for the good of the world. I am, as they say, avenging his death, if that is right context. Evi lowered her voice. We killed him. Jail time, nothing will take that fact away. Sergeant Patrick Shea stepped out from the open room. His party was being held. He had been leaning on the door sill and listening to the pair's conversation since they had been seated. Sergeant Shea nodded to the chief. Meneer de Vries, Shea addressed the chief. Barvan raised an eyebrow. Ja? He asked. The sergeant gestured to the teens. Shea turned and gave Lucas and Evi a small smile. Then, in crisp English, he said, These are our killers, sir. Evian van Beek and Lucas Hoysk, convicted of the manslaughter of Presi Bavver, attempted murder. New case, Noella. Thump. A stack of files in a manila folder lands on the desk in front of me, sending my papers flying. Great. Now my spotless office has papers everywhere. I huff and look up to glare at my boss's departing back. No case summary? He turns back, talking a few strides into the office and closing the door behind him. That's the good thing about being one of the top-ranking detectives in our firm. I get an office to myself. Unlike others such as Otto and Shorelick, who have to share one, it gives the privacy and thinking space one needs when uncovering confidential cases. Young woman, aged in mid-20s. Her name is Enya Brown. Enya Brown? The Enya Brown I rescued from a dark alley a year ago? I turn back to him, nodding in acknowledgement. She's reported claims of stalking and attempted murder. Interesting. Any reason why I was given the case instead of the others? I might be a detective chief superintendent in our firm, but there should be plenty of others qualified to take this case, especially those in his inner circle who don't have other things such as helping to run the faculty to do. Celine's in Egypt, Henrik's in Germany, Jericho's sick, and Manuel, Maxime, and Molino are busy. I don't want anybody else but the best detectives for this case. It's pretty serious, and there's little evidence at this stage. Only the best could pull it off. He pauses. Oh, and the client specifically asked for you. Make the Annery Feralis Detective Agency proud Noella. Then he departs, leaving me to ponder the case. That still leaves Jane and Danny unaccounted for, and I have no doubt he knew that. But what's happened to Enya since that night in the alley? I told her to contact me if anything was amiss, and I've talked to her since then. But it's been precisely 13 months, 2 weeks, and 16 hours since I rescued her from the alley, and the incidents date back at least 2 years. Why now? It was 8:30 in the evening, and I'd stayed back at work a bit longer to finish up writing a case report. The weather was miserable, having rained just minutes before, and the cobblestones were slick with water. A yellowed glow came from the rustic street lamps along the pavement, limning the edges of my briefcase with gold. Then I heard the scuffles, the thud, and the scream. Alarmed, I raced towards the sound, approaching silently as to not raise any alarm. It came from the far reaches of an alleyway that, from experience, I knew to be a dead end. The scream sounded female. The grunt that followed was male. I peered into the alleyway to see an auburn-haired female struggling against a bulky, dark-haired male's solid grip. She was pinned to the wall, and the brute was touching her in awful places, pulling at her clothing and drawing a dagger as she fought back. She stilled at the sight of the knife, and knowing her chances were slim, I slipped silently down the alleyway. Within moments, I had my arms around the brute's neck and a foot hooked behind his ankle. He slashed with the knife, and without a second thought, I'd kicked it from his grasp. With the brute pinned on the ground and his neck held in submission, I choked the air out of his lungs enough to render him unconscious, but no further. Quickly, I picked up my briefcase, glancing up to the young woman before me. She still hadn't run. "Are you all right?" "I'm okay, I suppose. Thank you." She looked away down the alley. "Will he be okay?" "He's just unconscious. He'll wake up in a few minutes, so we should head off. Do you need somewhere to stay?" She shook her head, but her eyes were distant. I shouldered off my coat, wrapping it around her shivering form. "Come on, girl. Let's get you somewhere safe. We'll get you nice and warm." Within 5 minutes, I directed her to a nearby hotel, had her swaddled in blankets and a cup of hot cocoa before her. She was too shaken to ask her any questions, but I could only assume what had happened. I remained with her for as long as I could, heading off home before my flatmate would worry about me. As I stood to leave, I retrieved a business card from my briefcase. "If you need anything, hun, just give me a call. I'm happy to help anytime you need it." I slipped it onto the table in front of her and quietly let myself out. The card on the table before her read DCS. Miss Noella Anderson, Anari Ferrales, Detective Agency, PH 0427738813, email noella.afta.org. Peeking my head into Skorlik, Kuhn, and Otto Schuster's office, it comes as no surprise that Otto is playing video games, and Skorlik is sitting on the windowsill reading a book. "New case, fellas. Briefing in my office in 10. An acknowledging grunt from Shorlick. "But I'm in the middle of the boss level, Noella. If you make me go now, I'll lose all my progress." Otto whines. "Suck it up, Otto. I've given you 10 minutes. That's enough. You shouldn't be playing video games anyway. You know that." He whines again, and I leave them to their activities, returning to my office. 10 minutes later, Skorlik enters my office, dragging a sullen Otto behind him by the wrist. We discuss the case, examining the details given and the evidence provided, both photographed and in hard copy. Skorlik and I figure out a plan forward, while Otto sulks. He'll confirm the DNA sample, while I trace emails and calls to Enya. Then we'll interview neighbors and retrieve security footage, then assemble the evidence and incriminate the offender. "What did you find?" I ask my co-workers. "DNA specimen confirmed," Skorlik says curtly. "Insights, Mr. Kuhn. There were a few sets of DNA on the letter, including Enya's own, but I narrowed down the suspect list to 2 brothers, Avery and Scott Lancaster, and another man called Jeremiah Hayes. They're the ones that fit Miss Brown's description. Mr. Hayes is suspected to be a friend of the 2 brothers. He could be involved with the case." Skorlik Kuhn sights back at his chair and glances at Otto Schuster, the other detective on my team for this case. "Anything new, Mr. Schuster?" "Quit the formalities, please. Nothing new, but I have a question." Skorlik. "Were both brothers' DNA on the letter?" "Indeterminate." "Why?" "Unconfirmed." "Well, I personally think the brothers are twins. Just saying." "Any evidence, Otto?" "No." "Search the database, though. I get the feeling they are." I search the database, and sure enough, they're twins. Paternal twins at that. Huh, look at that. Otto was right. They're identical twins, which explains why it's determinate. They have the same DNA. Skorlik nods, and Otto grins smugly. Well, fellas, guess we have our list of suspects. I traced the anonymous threat emails and calls to Miss Brown, to Avery Lancaster's house, and areas that he's reportedly visited. Oh, and it's not listed in the case. But after she was cornered in the lane, the ID card was found on the unconscious man, and it said Avery P. Lancaster, precisely the person all our other evidence has pointed to. Other evidence, such as him being one of Ennia's ex-boyfriends and being one of Ennia's suggestions of the suspect. That Avery guy must be some sort of creep, considering the things on that file, Otto commented. I wonder what his middle name is. Peter? More like P for psychopath, I mumble under my breath. Psychopath starts with S idiot, Otto says, turning to Shorlick. He puts his hands up, trying to tell Otto it wasn't him, but Otto gives him a skeptical look. Dumbass, it starts with P. Skorlik mumbles, glancing back at me. Meeting over. I get up to leave as they start to squabble. Psychopath starts with P, Otto. You should have learnt that in high school, I say, leaving Shorlick's relieved face and Otto's infuriated expression behind me. Walking door to door in Avery Lancaster's neighborhood, Skorlik, Otto, and I have found very little. The young family that lives across the road said that he's a nice guy that tends to keep to himself, but they'd only moved in recently, so could not provide much detail. The lesbian couple and the old man living either side didn't know anything of interest. Overall, there wasn't too much evidence that they could provide, but they agreed to let us view their security feeds that had a view of his house. That only leaves interviewing Avery himself. Knock, knock. The hollow sound reverberates through my fist as I knock on Avery Lancaster's front door. Good morning. Is there anything I can do for you? Avery's puzzled face steps out from behind the door. Yes, sir. I am Detective Chief Superintendent Noella Anderson, and these are my colleagues, Otto Schuster and Shorlick Kuhn. We would like to talk to you for a minute, if that's okay with you? Of course. Is anything wrong, miss? He looks genuinely oblivious and concerned, and I'm nearly convinced he could be a great actor. We'll speak inside, please. Was it my brother? I told him that rock adventure was a bad idea. I raise a brow. Your brother is fine. If we may? He lets us in, leading us through impeccably neat rooms and into the dining room. It's business time. Do you know why we're here, Mr. Lancaster? If it's not my brother being a doofus, then no, I don't. Should I know? Perhaps. We are here to ask you a few questions about Enya Brown. Brief pain flickers through his expression. Is Enya okay? He says, barely a whisper. Considering what's been happening in her life lately, she is doing rather well. You wouldn't happen to know anything about her recent activity, would you? No, I don't. I haven't spoken to her since we broke up, and I haven't seen her since. Interesting. Did you know that she's filed a case for stalking and attempted murder with the AFDA? What? You are the prime suspect, and all the evidence leads to you. So if you could tell us the truth, that would be greatly appreciated. He nods. Now tell me again, when did you last see her? About 2 years ago. We went out with a few friends, but I didn't really talk to her. It was still awkward from the breakup. Right. Was anything of notice said? Scott said she was hot. Enya ignored me most of the evening. But no, nothing of notice. Now why did you and Enya break up? She was going to study overseas, and my grandmother had just died. So the timing wasn't great for either of us. It pained us both greatly, but we knew it was the best for both of us. Neither of us have been in a relationship since, at least as far as I'm aware. Would you be jealous if another guy showed interest in her? No? I would respect Enya's decision to move on. She deserves to enjoy her life. Oh, come on, Otto bursts out. Quit the sappiness. If you haven't seen her in 2 years, then explain why 1 year ago she was attacked in a dark alley by a man fitting your description, wielding a knife. A man, I might add, that had an ID card with the name Avery Lancaster on it, or why your name was encoded into a death threat letter to Enya, Shorlick adds, and why the threatening calls and emails were traced back to your very house. Avery gets paler and paler with every question, as if realizing that he has no way out, realizing that he didn't hide his tracks well enough, and he was caught. I don't understand what you mean. You hear what we said, Mr. Lancaster. Your DNA was found on the letter, and there are all these other cases of evidence. Do you mind if we have a look around? We show him our search warrant, and he nods solemnly. Avery leads us around the house, showing us through the different rooms of his house. There's nothing much of notice in any of the places we search. This guy is pretty good at hiding his evidence. And this is the guest bedroom. My brother keeps some of his stuff here sometimes. We nod and have a poke around. We're just about to finish up when I spot a discarded plastic bag in the wardrobe. What's that, Mr. Lancaster? I don't know. Some of my brother's stuff. He visits sometimes and keeps some stuff here. I don't monitor his stuff. This room is the only place I allow him to put his stuff wherever he wants, and I won't clean it up. May we look inside? Of course. We open the bag curiously, with our latex gloves on, as not to disturb the possible specimens. The bag opens to reveal a pair of worn, woolen, fingerless gloves, a roll of sticky tape, an ID card bearing Avery's details, and a few folded pieces of paper. Skorlik pulls out one of the pieces of paper and reads it aloud for my dearest Enya. Really, I thought you'd have noticed by now. Our connection is true, and I love you dearly. Must you always hide from me? Show me what you can do in bed. Can you do that? Otherwise, I will finish what I started that night in the alley. If I can't have you, no one can. Terror upon you, shall you not oblige? Take what you want from me, but I will always prevail. Do not fail me. Love from your dearest. I miss you. Dark, much? But that sounds an awful lot like a jealous lover's letter. Did you write this, Mr. Lancaster? Avery shakes his head, and his face is deathly pale from fear. Fear for Enya, or fear for himself? Well, you have a lot of evidence against you, sir. I would recommend you start telling the truth, or you'll be imprisoned for lying to authoritative figures. Understood? I only wish to tell you the truth, ma'am. I did not know that letter was here, nor do I know who wrote it. May we take it for evidence? Of course, ma'am. And with that, Otto, Shorlick, and I take our leave, sealing the evidence in decontaminated specimen bags and leaving Avery's ashen face behind. So, what do you think of our adventure today? Avery's house sure was suspicious. Yeah, I think we have enough evidence now, Otto adds. I think Avery is innocent, Skorlick murmurs under his breath. I cut my glare across the table to him. What? Did I hear that correctly? Otto shrugs. You do understand, Shorlick, that every single piece of evidence we have points to Avery Lancaster. But maybe that's what the criminal wants us to think. Everything points to Avery. But if he truly did it, there would be some degree of a cover-up. This is all in the open. It's too easy. Mr. Lancaster's DNA is on every specimen. His pining for a lost love threaded through threat letters, class, and emails, all traced to his house, a house his brother visits often. Think, Noella, think. Are you saying it was Avery's brother, Scott, that is doing this? What would be his motive, though? It makes no sense, Skorlick. It's obvious. It was Avery. Check the cams for the night of the alley attack. I pull up the feeds from various residents' security cameras and go back to the date of the attack. We watch as a car pulls up in front of Avery's house, and Avery gets out, knocking on the front door. Must be Scott, I conclude. And sure enough, a second Avery greets him at the door. They go inside, and about an hour later, one of the Lancaster twins comes out holding a plastic bag, and there's a lump under his hoodie near his hip. The knife he pulled on Enya. Turning up the audio, we hear a voice yell from inside the house. Can you get me milk while you're at the supermarket? Thanks. See ya, Scott. Scott comes outside and gets into one of the cars that had been parked outside before he'd arrived, presumably Avery's, and drives off. Why didn't he take his own? We skip ahead to the dates of the emails and calls from Avery's house, and Scott had visited on every single one of them. Didn't Avery mention something about Scott having the hots for Enya? And he seemed pretty concerned for her, Otto suggests. But Skorlik and I's attention is elsewhere. The letter. The realization dawns on both of us, and as I peer over his shoulder, I notice something I hadn't when he'd read it out. Each sentence is on a new line, and the first letter of every sentence forms another message. From Scott L. My face slackens with the realization. Do you see it, Skorlik? He nods solemnly. It all makes sense. Their DNA is the same. Being twins, Scott tried to avert the attention from him, turning it on his identical twin. But ultimately, his diversions failed. He's been found out. Otto. It was Scott. The letters and the ID card prove it. It was Scott. I murmur. So it was actually Scott C. Lancaster, the evil side to his angelic brother, Avery, Otto says, in an exaggerated, scheming voice. Seems to me like his initial was a foretelling. C for criminal. He smirks, and we all burst out laughing, the relief enveloping me that Enya would finally be safe and that we'd done it, off with their heads. Yes, Mother. I sigh into the line, wrapping the infamous cord around my finger. Of course, I'm fine. What? No, it's not like I'm in the States. This is Britain, God damn it. Mother, no, I think you should lie down for a while. Call Dad as well. He'd fancy a visit from you, I'm sure. And just like that, my hand smashes back on the receiver. Blood, Britain, eh? Who could ever have imagined Olivia, from the apartment up above, would pursue law in England? Well, for starters, certainly not her. A buggy sweeps by my rusted telephone box as I take a single drag on the cigarette laid before me in its little red tin box. Rainwater nearly splashes up on my impeccable outfit, the poor thing. I shake my fist at the driver, but there's no use. The lad's already way off into the distance. What would the world be without Britain? Perhaps every world has some sort of Britain as well. Little men in their fancy outfits, always circling each other with arguments. At least they're nothing like that bloody American man. What was his name again? Nixon, was it? Yes. Terrible, terrible people doing amazing things. I've always found it fascinating, you know. My red kitten heels splash against more rainwater. I curse myself silently for not bringing that little red umbrella with me. Perhaps I could pick it up on my way to the office. Their stares don't avoid me as I run by. I can catch those disgusting men from the corner of my eye, all staring. It's not as if I'm putting on a show, is it? Still, I can only imagine what they see. A French woman, plush red lips against fair skin. I even tried to wear my longer crimson dress today. Turns out that effort proved fruitless. I jump into the office, gasping as the heat blasts me behind the wooden panels. In the background, I can hear softer jazz clashing with news reports from the telly, as if warring between each other. What is it this time? I ask Bonnie, the sharp woman sitting at the desk, or as she urges me to call her, Bonbon. Ridiculous name. Her bleached curls pull up nicely against her dark skin and bright yellow dress. She swears it's from that damn swinging Britain stage we're going through right now. She shrugs, leaning over to stare at the Pixel-E screen. Those Beatle kids are going to broke up, she snaps back, leaning into the plush sides of her chair. The corners of her mouth edge up slightly as she stares at the messily done bun in my hair. How do you get your hair like that? Oh, I grin back, picking up the large manila folder before her. Do shut up. What's our next case? It's hard to say. Bonbon plucks a pen from her container, absent-mindedly scribbling on her schedule paper. They ordered us to take up all the spots for the month. All of them? My eyebrows shoot up as I feel my face grow red with anger. The audacity. Who do they think they are to order us around? There are nearly 1 million clients in London, all looking for lawyers. And yet this flash bastard thinks he's important enough to take all her attention. This is the case. She heaves more mundane folders toward me, all packed to the brim with paper. I know it's a lot. You might even need to help us with this one, I tease. Not my style. Bonnie slumps back. Olivia, some of us girls aren't meant to be smart. We're just supposed to smile and look pretty. Some of us don't get enough funds to go to Oxford either, or travel back and forth from France. I ignore the dig. It's odd how Bonnie and I see ourselves as adults, despite both of us only just being able to drink. Right when I graduated from Oxford, I got accepted into this law firm, the best one in London. Sometimes I wonder if I'd even stay here without the job. Britain is just so dreary. It's quite depressing, especially at first glance. Maybe that's all it deserves. My heels clack down the hallway as I desert the drab lobby. When I finally reach my own personalized office, I feel as if I'm at home. I strut to the opalescent gramophone occupying the corner, placing a thin record upon it. Half my collection is sonata, while the other is all that new style of rock. I believe those critics have begun to call it punk. Whatever the case, it's the only connection I have to my generation. I often find myself discarded in this new, modern era. People believe there is to be so much more, but I can't possibly imagine what could come next. I sit at my small desk, shuffling through the papers that have been so graciously presented to me without haste. How does one look through these documents with such excitement, anyhow? I prefer the thrill of the courtroom to the dual sensation of passing through files and archives. Nevertheless, one needs to begin a task for them to finish it. After nearly 2 hours of reading, Bonnie returns to my office with a cup of tea and the person I'd least like to see right now. Darcy places a hand onto my desk, snatching the tea from Bonnie's hand. "I thought you'd like some tea," she whispers in an accusatory manner. "I see," I groan. "So much so that you grabbed it straight from Bonnie's hand." Darcy snaps her long white fingers. "Leave, pest. Make yourself useful and sort through the files." I all read. Our boss pulls her emerald-colored nails through her platinum blonde hair. "Who's to say I didn't mess them up while you were wasting time?" Bonnie's gum snaps as she pulls it back in from its bubble. "Course, miss," as her thin legs carry her off down the drab walls. Darcy smashes her fists on my desk before traveling to the gramophone, looking down with distaste. "I find all parts of your music taste disgusting." "Thanks," I mumble, returning to my work. "Now that you've given me some tea and made fun of my music, you can leave. I simply can't figure out how you work with this rock in the background." "First of all," I sigh, throwing down some more papers to the floor. Darcy's eyes widen, but I only shrug. "There's a method to my madness. They taught me some amazing things in your British college, you know?" "Ah, yes," she laments. "The French girl decides to bless us with her knowledge. You know." Darcy dumps more papers onto the floor. "In London, we don't do things with madness. We are intelligent, young women in a time of enlightenment. By the way, I didn't notice you at the Women's March last week. Were you busy?" "Darcy," I reply hastily. "You know I'm all for women's rights. Of course, there are things that I'd rather be doing than marching for them." "What?" she squawks, almost knocking over a clock now leaning dangerously toward the ground. She attempts to upright it, only to leave it tilted on its side. I suppose it's for the best. It's not like I often leave this small office. But then, if we march for it, people ridicule us. I'd rather work on letters to Parliament. And pray tell, where are these letters? I feel my face grow red as I bolt up. There better be a point to this meeting. Darcy backs away from my outburst, sighing. "I wanted to ask you what you thought of the case. Dr. Sherman came into his house late at night." I recall the words from the page now lying on the checkerboard carpet. His daughter was still at the secondary school's dance recital, one she only feigned interest in. Darcy raises an eyebrow. "I didn't remember anything like that in the case. I only assumed apologies. I'm sorry. Alice just brought a lot of attention to herself. Anyway, where were we? The very beginning, I believe. Precisely." I pretend not to notice the acid in her voice. Dr. Sherman swears that he was missing a certain object from his house. However, the object seems to be missing from the case. That's what I wanted to show you. Darcy nods. She flicks a paper toward my desk, containing only a black and white picture. I squint between the grainy pixels, making out an image. He's really suing for a hat? That hat costs over $100,000. Darcy discloses, snatching the photo back into her brown briefcase. But then, why is he suing for $1 million? I ask, still incredulous. He believes Blake Connery stole the hate. She adjusts her glasses before turning her back on me. Didn't you read the report? Of course I did. She sniffs at the outburst. Mr. Connery went to Sherman's house to go over their last meeting. Something about therapy, I believe. Perhaps this case could help you? Darcy points a pen towards me. You could use some anger management, and with that, the dastardly woman exits stage left, a smug smile still plastered on her face. Is it possible to hit a glass ceiling when your boss is a woman? Still, it's hard for me to believe it. And so you see, the red-faced man before me spits. That's why the hammer of justice must be brought down. My house was ravaged by this madman. I wouldn't dare say it for any of my other patients, but Blake Connery is a psychopath. Well, I can sense his anger rising even higher than mine as I look over the report. When you gave us access to your notes, it didn't seem as if Mr. Connery had any sort of mental illnesses besides his bipolar disorder. Exactly. He stands up, almost sloshing tea on my immaculate red dress. When Darcy had permitted me to interview Dr. Sherman, I'd expected someone much less unhinged. Why is it that the mad are always the most composed? He put on a farce. Dr. Sherman sits back down, crossing his hands. It's almost obvious that he's trying to pull some therapeutic shit on me. Of course, it'd take a lot more than that to faze me. Either Sherman's a bad therapist, or he truly is under a lot of stress from losing his hat. He made me believe that he's not a bloody thief. Let's not jump to accusations about the defendant. I place the papers back into their files to stop him from seeing the work I've already done. It wouldn't do for my client to already know I believe he's insane. Oh? A mousy blonde jumps into the scene, perhaps around 16. Nearly the age I was when I first came to this despicable city. Ignore Papa's ravings. He's just angry still, and rightfully so. For a moment, I'm afraid that he'll slap the girl I've already assumed to be Alice. But he laughs it off. Perhaps she has a therapeutic herself. Despite that fact, something bubbles inside of me as I stare at her in the slightly blue dress. It's my most prized possession. I can make you another, Papa. Alice leans down to hug her father's neck. He smiles, then turns back to me, the joy already wiped off his face. What can I say? I have that effect on some people. I'm sure you can, my butterfly, but we must bring down justice. And with that, I'm immediately done. I've gathered almost useless information, and then it dawns on me. This is what it's going to be like for a straight month, maybe more. This is what I despise about this city. Everything is either gloomy or wonderful. The people, the jobs, the world. But one thing stays the same. In fact, that's the charm of it. Everything is stagnant, orbiting around the world. We all get a chance to be in the spotlight. And sometimes, that's the worst part. I think I have enough information for today. I sigh, placing my tea down with a slow clink. Is it enough to incarcerate the bastard? You're suing him, I remind Dr. Sherman. He's not going to jail? Ha! When I'm done with him, I'm sure that won't be the case. I hired the entirety of the best law firm in the city to work on my case. I can't lose. I'm done arguing with him. On any other day, I'd gladly debate with him until he realizes how much of a damn fool he is. But today, it's almost impossible. The streets are nearly deserted for a crisp May day. I can hear the roars of a crowd in the distance, but there's no one on this street. I check my watch, disappointing myself almost immediately. It's still technically my lunch break, and I haven't found anything useful yet. I'd usually be good and done by now. Instead, I'm stuck in this rabbit hole of a case. No evidence, and I'm surrounded by lunatics. Just my luck, naturally. Eventually, I'm face to face with the source of the crowd's cheering. A band plays upon a large wooden stage, surrounded by small bulbs holding dead string lights. It doesn't take long to find a familiar face. Bonnie? She twists around, staring at me in fear. Her voice comes out way too fast, almost like Dr. Sherman's. Okay, look, don't tell Darcy. I just heard they were playing today, and I'm not telling Darcy, I urge. Anyway, they're pretty good. Better than anyone else on the radio, at least. What's their name? The Hatters. Bonnie shrugs. I know. It's weird. No? I shake my head. More like a coincidence. Ugh. She hangs her tan arms around my neck, jumping to the dark, sporadic beat. Are you still on that case? Well, Bonnie. My voice drifts off before I can dish out a biting comment. Wait. How do you know about the case? She blushes deep red. I might have read it? You did? I laugh incredulously, fixing it immediately after. No, I'm just surprised. That's great. I could use some help. But what made you decide it? Well, Bonnie shrugs. I just wanted to help out, I guess. I'm always just the girl behind the desk, the one with a smile. I saw how you stood up to Darcy, and her thoughts are interrupted by perhaps the cutest man eclipsing the world. A guitar held in his dark hands. His curls are covered in a thin sheen of sweat as he smiles toward us. It takes me a moment and a jab from Bonnie to realize it's me he's smiling at. Hey, he flashes us a gleaming grin, tipping a tall top hat clashing directly with his leather and chains. Name's Blake, and just like that, the conversation is ruined. No. The smile fades a little as the band on stage drifts off. I guess he's their central power source. I can't understand. I blush profusely. No, it's not you. I just mean, you're Blake Connery, I assume. Bonnie's eyes flash with fear at the notion. I mean, I know it's random. It's mad, but it's so me. Was it fate that brought us together? He brushes past Bonnie. But for once, I don't see her angry that a man is ignoring her. I can see the emotions warring in her mind. On one side, we know that I'm going to have to possibly rob him of all his money. On the other hand, he's hot. You know my name. Well, I pull out the manila folder, reaching for the picture displaying him I grabbed from Dr. Sherman's office. I also have your file. He doesn't display the reaction I expected. He leans back, staring down at his watch. You're working for Sherman, huh? That seems to be the case. So, Bonbon leans back, grabbing her bright yellow purse. I should probably. She leaves her bleach blonde curls bouncing in the wind. Can I just tell you? I try to imitate his smile, only to completely cringe. That man is clearly insane. That gives him a laugh. It's his daughter, Alice? Now I have to stifle my chuckle. But she's innocent. That's just what she wants you to believe. Say, how about you stick with me, and you win this case for me? I have heaps of knowledge for you. And I suppose you know this because you're an expert lawyer? Dr. Sherman holds all his meetings in his house, Blake recites. I was there lawfully, and I never stole his hat. But we don't have the security cameras. I beg your pardon, Sherman has cameras. And even if he won't give you access, I will. And you lawfully took these? Ya got me there. Blake stares sheepishly down toward the folder. I have connections. And that isn't shady at all. If you've been having a bad time in this city, it's because you haven't been living like me. I know it all. That doesn't answer my question, genius. Look, Connery stares back at the clock again. Are you on a break? I have about an hour or two before I need to return to the office. Sherman cut the meeting short. Have lunch with me. I promise that by the end of it, you'll be swayed to my side. And what does that mean? He produces a wallet, holding up a wad of cash. Whatever Sherman paid you will look like a joke compared to what I can give you. I'll even give you more than just money. Okay. I blush. Let's just lead the way, gladly. Miss Olivia. Blake flashes me another dangerous smile. I believe this will be the beginning of a great union. The dark night. A shadow of a figure was running in the dark. All around were tall trees, and only a small fraction of the moon's rays got through the canopy. The ground was a black void, with no difference between the dirt and the tree roots. A pack of wolves howled in the distance. With every gust of wind, the tree branches and leaves banged and rustled like a toddler playing with pots and pans. Under all of that was a low mumble, rhythmic, like a drum cadence, but ghostly in origin. The figure trips. Eli. The scene quakes. Eli. The moon disappeared. Elijah. Blinding fluorescent light replaced the woods. 13-year-olds Eli and Tyler were sitting in the mall food court, eating dinner across from each other. Eli's heart was pounding in his ears, and his hands trembled. Tyler put her hands on his. Eli, what did you see? Eli repeatedly blinked back at her as the fog lifted from his head. I don't really know. Come on, she said, slinging on a side bag as she raised from her chair. You can think about it on our way home. I don't want to miss the bus. Without a word, Eli cleaned up their table and carried the tray away. As soon as his hand was free, he reached for her hand. They walked away from the tables, with Tyler locking her arm from Eli's swinging. Not too many people were left in the mall. There were a few stragglers around the pop-up stands, but most were lacing their arms through jacket sleeves by the exits. However, two men, a twig-like one with close to the head African curls, and a log-like one with slicked hair, mostly to one side, didn't fit in either group. They stood off the side, away from everyone else, surveilling, looking for something. Their cookies and cream vibe didn't make Tyler divert their path. She was right until they stepped into their way. Excuse us, Tyler Woodlock and Elijah Krieger, the twig one asked through a British accent. Tyler pulled Eli closer. No, sorry, she answered, starting to walk around them, with her and Eli's fingers turning red. Government agents. The other man stopped them, flipping open his budget case. Miss Woodlock. The Brit slid closer as Tyler gave out a nervous laugh. She pulled it together with a devious smirk. All right, agents. She stepped closer. But one thing first. Yes, the man said, putting his budget back. Tyler gave the Brit, the fitter one, a stiff kick in the shin. With him on the floor and his partner stunned, she yelled, "Run, Eli," giving Eli a push start. Eli sprinted off, getting a head start as Tyler toppled over a supply case. He headed for the loading docks, a path Tyler forced him to memorize for an emergency like this. As ordered, he ran without looking back. He nearly ran off the truck port in his mindset. He jumped down. Falling on his hands, he looked like a frog. He couldn't find the strength to stand, but he walked, half crawled, to the rear of the building. Collapsing against the brick, he took his chance to look back. She wasn't there. He stayed twisted around the corner, waiting for Tyler. All of a sudden, bright light beamed onto him. Drawing Eli's attention, the voice called out. "Stay there!" They boomed like a drill sergeant. He clambered to his feet and did the total opposite as the voice commanded. A stampede of boots followed Eli as he jotted into the wooded area on the other side of the loading lane. The fall night grew darker as he was chased farther in the woods. With every gust of wind, the tree branches and leaves banged and rustled. Their movement shifted and blocked the moon as if in a game of peekaboo. This and the uneven ground made Eli bobble like a pinball. The voice rang out again. "Get him! Don't let him get away." It allured him to look back. A light show of flashlights was going on behind. Even with all the light, however, the people remained shadows. A gopher tunnel tripped Eli up a bit. As he looked up, a pair of amber eyes, low to the ground, stared at him from a few yards away. The progression of howls following the encounter made Eli run fast. He couldn't hear the boots anymore. He would turn his head a few degrees before forcing it straight. The last one sent him flying into the ground. Tyler peered over a row of bushes. Eli laid on the ground, with only his chest moving up and down. As soon as she raised from her position, two men came into view. One went to Eli's side, and the other pulled out a radio. Asset found, about 4 clicks due east of the loading dock. The radio guy looked around the perimeter as the second man searched Eli's pocket. Tyler fished around in her bag. In the dark, the inside of her bag was a void. She felt cold metal as more men appeared. The one left Eli's side. "The cards aren't here, sir." Eli let at a moan as he began to stir. "Bring him. We'll find out soon enough where they are." He turned and started the procession away. Radio and Pocket Man gave each other a glance before Pockets threw Eli over his shoulder. The remaining men followed. Tyler took her hand out of her back. She fell to her knees, with her hands on her face. As the first tears started falling, she wiped them away with her fists clenched. She ran back to the mall, heading towards the parking lot. Her head bubbled back and forth, looking at the cars and people. Losing her structure, she fell back on her knees. She started crying again, right before her ears perked up. Snapping her head around, she saw the 2 agents from inside. "We lost, ma'am," she heard the agent who threw his badge in her face. They were ready to run. A grin grew across her face. She spined back, with her attention being grabbed by the rear of the car she fell in front of. The license read, CA exempt 387690. She had seen enough of those when the police raided their Romani dwellings. The odds of that being their car, she didn't know. Not did she know the odds of them automatically unlocking it far enough away that she could climb into the trunk before they were close enough to see. The 2 agents and their unknown guest arrived at their motel on the outskirts of town almost an hour after Eli was taken. The building wasn't too big, just 2 rows with 8 or so doors each. Behind each were a single room and a bath. The agents went first. Tyler waited until she couldn't hear them anymore before pushing out the back row cushion. Sitting on the floor of the car, she watched as they entered a room with the number 6 on the door. She opened the door carefully so she wouldn't hit the next car. In the same manner, she closed it without a sound. She strategically stepped as she reached back into her bag. After peering into the room's window, she saw the 2 agents with their backs to the door. There seemed to be nothing but a wall in front of them. But that didn't bother Tyler. She walked right in and pulled her hand out of her bag before slamming the door shut. The agents jumped if shots had been fired. They found that they weren't too far off. Dropping their phone, they were face to face with a gun barrel. "Hello again, miss." "Woodlock," one agent said through his British accent as they snuck for their weapons. "Don't patronize me," she said, cocking her gun. "Do you think you can pull yours before I shoot the both of you? I've already proved I have grace under pressure." They both bring their hands forward. "What do you want?" the other one asked. "Well, Agent Vincent Petrov, I'm thinking about a trade." Flaunting his arrogant British accent, he asked, "What would you have that we would?" Cutting him off, Tyler pulled out a deck of tarot cards. "Really? I might be a child, but I'm not an idiot." "That still doesn't answer my question," Vincent said. "I want Eli back." "Excuse me, even if I believe for a second you're not with the men who took him, you bring him back to me, and you get these no-so-meaningless cards, and we all live happily ever after." The agents gave each a glance. "Let me make this easier. You do this, or I shoot you and go on my merry way." Eli was groggy, teetering between awake and asleep for the car ride, though no one could tell through the blindfold, nor from his position in the trunk. They had tried his wrists and ankles to stop the little fight he had in him. No kicking, no hitting, no running. More helpless than he was without Tyler. He was asleep when the car stopped, but was jarred awake when one of the men yanked him out. Being bobbled around, his face was red and breathed deeply, trying to keep dinner in. The only relief came when he was dropped to the floor. After the bang of the door, Eli was left to wait once more in the dark. He pulled at his ropes, only stopping when the burning turned into paper-cut sensations. No closer to freedom, he crumbled, stopped straining, stopped fighting, stopped holding it together. Back at the motel, Tyler sat crisscrossed on the first bed from the door, yanking her locket back and forth on its chain. She stared at the agents that sat on the other side of the room. She tried to hear what they were saying, but they put the same effort into the opposite. "What are we going to do, Miles?" Vincent asked. "Play the game. Easier said than done. We know when, where, and a fair idea of by who. The who is what scares me. I would be more scared of the lass if we don't." I agree with Agent Walker, a woman dressed in a white skirt suit with her dark hair in a spiral braid said just inside the room. Ms. Isles? Vincent jumped out of his seat. Tyler did the same. She stared at the woman, jotting a glance at the door, then back. No one heard the door open or closed. "Hello, Miss Woodlock," Ms. Isles said, raising her hand. "Hi," Tyler said, more like a question than snipe, without shaking her hand. "Well, do you want the good news or the bad news?" "Good would be best," Vincent toddled. Isles looked at Tyler. "Find the boy. Bring him back. Finish your original mission," she said through a smile. She began to walk away. She already had her hand on the doorknob before any of them stopped her. "What about the bad news?" Miles shouted. "Work with her, Walker. Work with her," she said, leaving before and without argument. Eli had no idea how long he was asleep for, but when he opened his eyes, he was met with a blinding light. He stretched out to find his legs and arms unbound. Panicked and joyed, he shuddered and jostled. He missed the hand on the wrist. A shadow eclipsed the bright light. "Do you mind not moving?" The voice sounded familiar. With the light masked, Eli could start to see the room. First, the man kneeling in front of him, graying hair, flannel button-up shirt, and placid blue eyes. Then small red spots on the gray cement floor. And last, white bandage roll, some on his right wrist, and the man wrapping more onto his left. "I think you've bled enough on my floor for today," the man said, finishing his work. "Your floor? Don't be put off by the casual dress. I'm the boss here, and that's why I can offer you this. You answer all my questions, and you can go home to your gypsy family, to your sweet wife, Tyler, without any more harm." "What do you want to know?" Eli asked as he sat up. "Why don't we start with something simple? Why did you run away from me at the loading docks?" said the man who blared a flashlight in Eli's eyes earlier that night. Vincent sat at the small two-person table, glaring at a street map and a calculator. "How is it going, Vince?" Miles asked, leaning over Vincent's shoulder. "Not great. Knowing that they took Elijah 75 minutes ago, and assuming they stayed within 5 miles per hour of the speed limit, they can be anywhere within and around 50 miles away from the mall. That's a big area. You don't know the half of it." "Miss Woodlock." "Tyler!" she yelled at him. "My name's Tyler." "Tyler." He put his hands up halfway. "Can you give us anything? Car model, direction, anything?" "I was a little busy, trying not to get caught myself. Trying to find you fools. If we try to search all of this," Vincent pulled Miles closer and lowered his voice, "we won't get to him in time." "Don't talk like that," Tyler yelled, with a little cry behind it. "You start talking like that, and things will end that way." She fell back onto the bed, with her hands on her face. Miles glared down at Vincent, with his arms crossed. He kept that position as he walked over to the bed. Sitting next to her, he put his arm around her, with an air bubble between them. "Thanks," she said, whipping her hands out from her face. "It's getting late. Why don't you rest for a bit? We don't want our sharpshooter's eyes heavy." I've been one for the last 10 years. But she paused, bringing up her watch on her right wrist. Watch, she continued, jumped off the bed. What? Miles followed her towards Vincent. Watch. She started searching her bag. I got Eli a watch for our first anniversary. He never takes it off. She presented the watch's instructions. And it has GPS. Anniversary? They asked. During their time together, the man asked Eli an array of questions. Most about trivial personal things to get Eli relaxed and uncoil from his balled-up position. It was working, too. He was as relaxed as if he was home. His eyes glassed over as the questions droned on. The room faded away. A dark place appeared. A spotlight shines on the center. A glint of metal moved in from the bottom. A gun, revolver, a white hand, a flannel sleeve. The hand snapped the bullet holder back into the gun. It aimed. Destroying the image, the shot fired caused Eli to scream and hold his ear. His ears were still ringing when the man tried to calm him down. Eli saw what he expected was on his own face, on the man's. The man removed Eli's hands. His mouth moved, but Eli couldn't hear it. He yanked himself away. Why are you asking me all these questions? What do you want? The man had a blank face. He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. After straightening his shirt, he said, "You have something that belongs to me." "I don't have anything." Eli shuddered. "Not now, but..." He exhaled heavily through his nose. "Tyler gave you something. A set of tarot cards." "I don't know where they are," he stuttered. "Well, it's the last question you have to answer, so give it a good thought. They could be anywhere. In the woods where you chased. Back in the mall where the other two did. With," he said, trying to put the brakes in his mouth. "Sir, you know where they are." No, I don't." "Yes, you do." He pulled a gun from his back waistband. "Tell me." Eli's mouth opened, but the only crashing noises came. The sound made both of them jot their attention towards the door. The man gritted his teeth. The other two. Staring down at his gun, he weighed it in his hand before bringing it down on Eli's head. Eli fell to the floor again. The last thing he saw before the backs of his eyelids was the man's black shoes walking out the door. The black gave way to wisps, at first merging into cacti and sand. They whirled by through the view from a car window. Tyler sat on the opposite side, smiling back. In the front seat sat Miles and Vincent. The whole picture felt loving and had a dream-like glow. It faded into a face full of fabric. Before he could freak out like his earlier ones, a hand touched his shoulder. "You're all right now. You're safe," Tyler cooed. In a quick movement, Eli raised to hug her, nearly bringing them to the floor. Regaining her structure, she hugged back. In their embrace, Eli missed Miles and Vincent standing off to the side, smiling down at them. Thoughts kill. I held in my cough as I entered the bathroom, senses already on high alert. Smoke unfurled around, blinding me for a moment. It took a second to gauge my surroundings, but once I had, it came as no surprise to see my older brother standing in their group. The only boy in here. After all, this was a ladies' bathroom. I watched in the mirror as the cigarette got passed around. A girl with pouting lips, caked in maroon lipstick, passed it to my brother. His lazy smile at her and the smoke around were in competition to make me nauseous. A familiar bubble of bile arose in my throat as he puffed out carbon monoxide. I clenched my nostril muscles, focusing on fixing my hair in the bathroom mirror. Luckily for me, I hadn't been spotted yet. They all started laughing as he did some kind of trick with the smoke. My eyes were so narrowed now, I could hardly see out of them. Once my hair was done, I walked over to the door, palm raised to open it, when a girl's voice said, "It's coming tomorrow," my brother's voice answered. "The LSD?" "Shut up!" the girl barked, leaving the bathroom deathly silent. I felt his eyes on my back before I saw them. Next thing I knew, I was slammed into the bathroom wall, inches from a familiar face. His lip curled. "Hello, sister." "Your sister?" the girl asked. She better not be a snitch. My brother didn't answer. I took refuge in the fact that I knew secrets of his that he'd rather die than let his friends know. Or that I knew he still had nightmares about Dad. Or that he used his blanket as a tissue for his snotty nose. His breath steamed on the mirror next to my head as he leaned in harder, earning a yelp from me as I felt his shirt button press in. "Don't let me find you in here again." I arched an eyebrow in response, trying to mask the turmoil inside. "LSD? No way." "Oh, brother, should I tell them?" He read all his secrets on my face. "Go to hell," he snarled. I held out my hand in answer. He looked ready to spit on me as he pulled out a $5 from his pocket. I shook my head with a smile. He took out another. I took the money from him, squirmed out from the bathroom, and contemplated calling Mom. I knew Caleb drug dealt, but this? Everyone knew it never stopped at cigarette time. It had only been a matter of time. And that night, I gave the money to Mum with a too bright smile. "You know, honey, I don't need a commission from the money you earn. The job pays well, Mum," I said with a shrug, the lie spilling from my mouth like silk. She gave me a side hug, then carried on with her work. I lingered for a moment, at odds on whether I should tell her. But when I saw her eyebrows sink into a furrow, her lips into a frown, I decided that she had enough on her plate. When the front door slammed, indicating my brother was home from God knows where, neither my mum nor I left our rooms to greet him. The ritual had been long gone since Dad had left. Well, Dad's hello was more actions than words to Caleb. I can't deny that I hadn't felt the want to stop him all the time. Hearing his footsteps outside my door, a feeling of hate so red clouded my mind that I found it hard to breathe. Mum was at the epicenter of it all. Her money had all been stolen by him for the drugs he was addicted to, then played off as a fraud. I was simply recycling the money back to the owner. It was tough falling asleep that night, knowing I couldn't stop what was going to happen tomorrow. But even if I could, I wouldn't. I wanted him to hit rock bottom. That was the only hope for change for him. And maybe that made me a sucky person. Hell, the worst person. But it's what he deserved in my eyes. The pain I saw flit on my mother's eyes when he'd come home drunk a few weeks ago was enough to make my fiery personality want to put a bullet through his heart. I avoided that bathroom at all costs on Tuesday. There was no way I'd be near choked again. I'd had to cover the bruises from yesterday up with a woolen scarf. In summer, I looked like a right idiot. School went smoothly. Well, as smoothly as a high school day in America can possibly go. And then I was home. I put my phone on D&D, the thoughts running through my mind, demanding instant attention. Being home alone was one of my favorite things. Just my mind and I. I sat on my windowsill, watching the city below me. There was something so serene in feeling the wind play on your face, to be isolated, but to also see hundreds of people below you, hustling around. I wonder if this is how God feels. I don't know how long I sat there for, but when I next opened my eyes, the sky was pitch black, and the city was now bustling with partygoers, dressed in sparkling dresses, with equally shiny champagne glasses in hand. I quickly climbed inside, wondering why my mum hadn't called for me yet. But then I heard a noise from her room. I hadn't realized how tight my chest had gotten, but it loosened as I felt her presence in the house. Caleb wasn't home yet. "Mom?" I asked, tentatively pushing her door open with a toe. I got a shock when I saw her bloodshot eyes turn up to look at me, tears streaming down and mixing with her mascara. I rushed to her side. "Mom? What's wrong?" I asked, a little forcefully, the panic already rising. Her eyes held mine as she whispered the words I thought I'd never hear. "Caleb is dead." The phone finally rang. It had been 5 days. The investigators said they'd call once they found out what had happened. LSD doesn't kill, I murmured to myself, over and over. But it doesn't change the fact of what happened. "Hello?" I answered, words tasting weird on my mouth after not talking for nearly a week. "Is your mother there?" I passed the phone to my already crying mom, leaning in to listen over her shoulder. I only got bits and pieces. 5 minutes later, my mother put down the phone, hand still trembling. "It wasn't LSD. He didn't take LSD," So he took something else? She shook her head, her throat bobbing as she swallowed a sob. The supplier sold them a synthetic drug as LSD. I had one goal. One. To put that supplier behind bars for the rest of his life. Maybe that would take away the guilt that I practically killed my own brother. The Dark Files of Lazarus, case number 13. Lazarus, the city built upon the ashes of Los Angeles, has irony in mounds as high as the carbon steel coins piling up in the newly formed vaults. Theo Baxton was the 13th child born into this city after its establishment. Blessed at birth, cursed at life. Again, the irony piles on. Superstitions aside, young Theo had the average childhood of those in the city. A busy father, a mother who stayed at home making a side business for her personal hobbies, schools located on the outskirts as a means to accommodate all from different walks of life, rival gangs that start between said schools and end up either inside of the city or inside the ground. Theo was no exception. He was branded to the Cater Kings, a gang that sought to make money between other gangs as an intermediate and peacekeeping family. Fees were issued to them to end turf wars before they started, a fair sum of carbon steel coins and fruit seeds that could also be traded in for food and weaponry. Young Theo was trained as the accountant of the group, having excelled in his classes of mathematics. In fact, given his devotion to the numbers, he was also allowed to freelance between the gangs. Word would spread throughout Lazarus of the boy genius with a fist in fights and a hand in banks, and he had his own office flat amongst the perks of a local celebrity. This climb would continue for 3 years until the peace was finally shattered. A third world war was an ongoing rumor even in this decade, but the threat of such was a temptation that could no longer be ignored. The federal government, trying to keep its iron hand upon the nation's throat. At the same time, groups of states were seceding from the Union, starting with Texas and Florida. California was arguing its points to secede despite being government central for years. Tensions were high everywhere, and all it would take was one little push. According to an associate of Theo, who wished to remain anonymous, a letter with no return address and a waxed seal pressed with an emblem of a serpent eating its own tail. Inside, Theo told his associate that it was from someone named Enzo, asking for help to what was described as a complicated accounting error. Despite Theo's policy to only work with people within the city, the letter promised a large reward, $50 million in carbon steel, with an extra $5 million sent to him as an incentive. All he had to do was leave his answer outside of his door by the second day of receiving the letter. The answer was yes. On the fourth day, the associate stated that a large sum of carbon steel was made to Theo's personal vault. The bankers, however, refused to divulge information at the time according to their privacy policies, and insisted that since no amount of money was stolen or missing, that this was just another paycheck for Mr. Baxton. Come the afternoon, a large box was delivered to Theo's office, containing paperwork and USBs pertaining to the error mentioned in the letter from Enzo. Theo did examinations and cross-examinations, contacted different businesses, and even got in touch with several tax collectors. Apparently, several different accounts belonging to key figures within the city gangs were seized, and the paperwork of each were sent to the wrong people in authority, all of which were dismissed under negligence. Now, no longer needing any trials, the figures could get their money back, but the public servants refused to be involved with the returns. Instead, Theo was contacted as a representative of the Cater Kings to oversee the return of the physical funds. The associate then told of what happened over the next few weeks. Delivery trucks containing wooden boxes of the promised funds were driven to the outskirts of Lazarus, where the gangs of the prominent figureheads awaited to take to the vaults personally. The associate noted two things that were strange. All the truck drivers wore masks, and all the boxes were locked with their designated keys back at the vaults, awaiting in the hands and granted access only by the bank personnel. Still, the gangs were happy to have their money back, and they praised Theo and the Cater Kings as heroes. The associate refused to answer any more questions, as he had pled the fifth with great tremoring. He was excused and escorted back to his home. The rest of the case was a jigsaw of events relayed by the media that left Lazarus with blood in the streets, controversies and conspiracies, and many unanswered questions. Several stores and storage facilities of fruit seeds were set ablaze over a course of 9 days. A week later, large crowds were running at large around the streets whilst throwing glass bottles and broken pieces of concrete at vehicles and buildings. Citizens were set in a panic as droves of gang members washed upon them like a furious flood. The local police had to team up with the city's firefighters to stem the flow of violence, but they were outnumbered and could only give way yard by yard. The hospitals were soon filled to capacity with victims of the assaults, several of which were fatal. What caused this outburst? It turned out that it had to do with a bounty of 10 million carbon steel coins for the capture of Theo Baxton, with double if caught alive. Apparently, one of the heads of the gangs issued the order not long after the delivery of the boxes to the banks. A call was made from the bank once the packages were opened, citing fraud via forgery and non-delivery of goods, followed by a plea for help against an all-out mob assault. The police noted that none of the perpetrators used any weapons outside of the bank's own supplies, from chairs to pens and even magazines, with hysterical employees reporting threats against the traitor, the embezzling rat, with maledictions attached. Theo himself was unable to be reached, for he was no longer in Lazarus. Another of his associates, before dying of his wounds in one of the hospitals mentioned earlier, only uttered this: "Had to get him out. He, not in the wrong, framed. Got him out to a friend. Gotta find Enzo." The assessment by the city's detectives were as followed. Theo was made aware of the goods inside of the containers, which turned out to be lead bars. He was made to lay low as the Cater Kings tried once more to keep the peace. The turmoil was spiraling off the rails, and the Kings were placed in the spotlight. The head of the Cater Kings, who also remains anonymous, promised the others that he would provide them with the guilty party members, i.e., he was going to offer Theo up as a sacrifice. Theo was made aware of this by one or more of his associates, official or on the outside yet on his payroll, and had to arrange for departure. Then came the arson, and that pushed everyone over the edge in desperation, especially with the bounty issued and made public despite the denial of the gang leaders giving such an outcry. Theo and company had to fight their way out of his flat and office to the getaway vehicle, which had to blow through pockets of people, as obtained from the records of different doctors overseeing patients who were all victims to the same speeding car that bowled them onto the streets. All good things must come to an end, and for a young man with a talent for numbers, it was almost curtains. About 900 people were admitted to the hospitals, with 88 losing their lives. Amongst the lost were 13 cops, 15 firefighters, 9 store owners, and a mixture of citizens and gang members. In the aftermath of one of the darkest moments of Lazarus, the questions still rebound about the roads and haunts. Who was Enzo? Who really sent the bounty, if not any of the gang leaders? Where was the money? Where is Theo Baxton? Until the young accountant is apprehended, no one knows. There is doubt that even he will know. Authorities are looking as far as the coastlines, but so are many a gang member, with the Cater Kings intent on making good of their promise. Once, a city of angels was promised. Now, a den of devils has been erected, and it calls out for nothing less than vengeance. Marie Antoinette. Squat, beige, and Soviet, the Marie Antoinette apartments stood against the stale gray Minneapolis sky. Irony of the worst kind, he thought, blandly ugly and unconscious. He would take exquisitely self-aware irony any day over this 3-story architectural monstrosity, classed up with tacked-on Ionic Greek columns, harsh blue LED Christmas lights wrapped inexpertly around them, canned Christmas classics pumping through the air. God, this place was only better than minimum security prison by a hair, but it was all he could afford now, so he'd just have to lower his eyes and his standards every time he approached. He tried to avoid the other people in the building, but a few of the near indigent souls, especially the family across the hall, insisted on pestering him with their lowbrow holiday cheer, the cheap gift of homemade cookies, the invitation of a seat at their dinner table on Christmas night on the flip side of a child's crude drawing of a Christmas tree slipped under his door. All this might have been more bearable if anyone he knew now understood why the Marie Antoinette apartments pained his soul, filled him with righteous rage. He'd certainly never get that from his obtuse, court-appointed therapist, a small, garish woman whose office and clothing reeked of TJ Maxx. So, he amused himself by using up their 50 minutes, complaining about how much he hated living there. His fingers itched to blow the place up, Her told her, to set it alight. She told him there were healthier ways to channel and examine his negative emotions, so he could eventually let them go. He needed to think about what the Marie Antoinette represented to him, she told him, to look deeper, and to perhaps think about its positive attributes instead. This made him laugh hysterically. How much deeper can I go than living inside the damned building? Should I dive into the meaning of my laminate, faux wood floors and formica kitchen counters, the rancid smell of old cooking that oozes from the graying, cracked walls studded with nail holes and abandoned archaeological remnants of tape from all the miserable souls who inhabited the purgatory before me? How about the rust-stained, leaking toilet and body oil-marked tub? Should I look for Rorschachs in its grimy patterns? That's not what I meant, she said quietly. And you know it. Well, I cherish my negative emotions, he said, suddenly tired. They're the only things keeping me going these days. Till near morning, a couple of weeks before Christmas, after one too many sleeping pills, he had a vivid dream. It started out of focus as he dragged himself toward the Marie Antoinette, bearing his usual cloak of heavy gray resignation, and pushed hard against the main door, as he always had to. Only this time, the door sprang open, and instead of jarring, cold Christmas music, warm strains of exquisite chamber music vibrated through him. All came into focus. The entryway had grown to twice its size, the gray, nondescript industrial carpet replaced with a glowing mahogany parquet floor. Instead of aluminum mailboxes and a frameless wall mirror on either side of the narrow space, giant gilt mirrors reflecting golden candlelight and gold and cream fleur-de-lis silk wallpaper covered the walls. The walls heaved outward until the room became what it wanted to be, a grand palace ballroom, complete with gently tinkling, candle-lit chandeliers. A ballroom for him alone. The effect was ostentatious, but stunning, the way his ex-wife had decorated their homes in the city, on the island, at the lake, near the slopes. Their homes for every preposition, all gone now. He dream-prayed he had died and gone to heaven. But he awoke to the same ordinary life, the drab apartment, a shift at the same greasy job, and another boring session after it with his therapist, the only person he ever said more to than, "Can I take your order? Would you like fries with that?" A woman he would have sneered at, if not ignored, in his old life, and would again someday when his luck turned. Would he tell her about his dream? He decided he would. It seemed safe enough, wasn't about the past, the present, or even the future. It was just a dream. But was it? As his workday dragged on, the customers who filed into the restaurant looked at him, smiling with something more, it seemed to him, than mere pre-Christmas cheer. He began to wonder if the dream wasn't a message. Maybe his luck was about to turn. He'd paid his dues after all. That old feeling began to tingle again. By the time his 4 o'clock appointment with TJ, as he'd taken to calling her, even to her face, arrived, he'd decided he must keep the dream to himself until he knew more. He had to get through the session, get home, eat a little something, and take his sleeping pills. "You seem distracted today," TJ said late in the hour. "Something happened this week?" Same old, same crappy job, same crappy apartment. He shifted his gaze to the pressed board, the leave plaque near the window before she could read him. But she was astute, this small, tacky woman. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw her cock her head. "You're not complaining like you usually do. Did something change?" Like I said, nope. Maybe I've adjusted to living in a shithole, I don't know. He attempted to give her an aw shucks grin, but felt his face contorting in weird ways, so he scrambled to throw her a bone. "Have I told you about my neighbors across the way?" He leaned back and sneered, coming up with an awful lie. "I'd swear to God she's killing him sometimes, and man, I wish she'd succeed so I can get some rest." "What do you think it means, Doc, that I don't care if he dies?" TJ sighed and drummed her red fingernails on her thigh. "It's Clauso 450, she said. "Let's just pick this up next week." Tilda. The dream started the same as before. Heavy quotidian dread as he approached the stunted building, growing excitement and wonder as it opened to a Versailles-like hall of mirrors. But this time, the hall was filled with people, giant people. People twice his height, in silken 18th century finery, swirling and spinning around the room, wind-up dolls in white wigs with faces he recognized. His old clients, wealthy people he'd cheated and stolen from for years, people he'd fooled into being his friends, people from the life he wanted back desperately. He tried to speak, to get their attention, but nothing came, not even air. As he watched, the dancers grew larger. Wait, no, he grew smaller. He was shrinking, becoming more and more insignificant. An insect, a speck, dirt. He would always be dirt. Tilda. He stumbled through the rest of the week, his nights vast and dreamless. TJ seemed surprised to see him in the waiting room early but said nothing. He sat on her couch, cleared his throat. "I had this dream," he said, "that my building became a palace, but one I will never have access to again." His voice shook. She handed him the tissue box. Yes. He gave her a brief description of the dream. "What do you think it means?" she asked. "Isn't that your job?" "No," she said simply, and crossed her arms, waiting. "I guess. I don't think I'll ever again have the life I had before." "I don't think," he said, swallowed. "I deserve it." "No," she said again, not clarifying what she meant, which oddly made him feel more respect for her. "So, what now?" "That's up to you." "Well, a hint might be nice," he whispered, wanting to scream. He swallowed. You are my damn therapist after all. Okay. What do you miss most about your old life? Not from in here. She tapped her head. Not ego. From here. She tapped her chest. Heart. What do you really miss? He shook his head. I don't know. Without those things on the table, nothing. I mean, I don't have kids. My ex-wife was a money-grubbing bitch, and my friends... Shit, I didn't really have those. Maybe luck. But that's not what you mean either. I know what you're getting at, but you're barking up the wrong tree. She smiled, the first full smile he'd seen from her since they'd met, before she'd gotten to know him. I don't think so. I think you're getting somewhere. Maybe your dream was telling you more than you think. Like I've said before, dig deeper, go further. The answers are there, inside that building and inside you. He choked back a snarky, whatever, Obi-Wan, and nodded at her. Glancing at the clock above the door, he stood, smoothing his sweaty palms against his jeans. Hold on. She held up a finger and smiled again. I have something for you. He stared, not comprehending. She turned to fish something out of a paper bag, then turned back, holding out a flat package wrapped in green tissue paper and red curly ribbon. Of course, Christmas was only 4 days away. He stammered, cheeks reddening. I didn't get you anything. He didn't know why he was embarrassed, which only made him blush harder. She laughed. I was not expecting you to. Don't worry about it, it's no big deal. Merry Christmas. Merry, yeah, he said, looking down at his name. Jeb, in black marker on the paper, an inexpertly drawn holly leaf and berries below it. A feeling spread, not altogether unpleasant, replacing ungenerous thoughts about the cheesy gift she'd likely procured at TJ Maxx. Thank you, Geraldine, he mumbled and bumbled out the door. Tilda. He worked Christmas Eve day, took the bus, and trudged home as the sun set again too early, the day again too short, carrying his fast food dinner and a bottle of California Pinot Noir he'd splurged on. It was only 4, but it felt like midnight, and his near-unfurnished apartment felt more featureless and tired and depressing than prison ever had been. Because it was his choice to leave it so, he realized. He had nowhere else to go, so he busied himself with eating and drinking, the food cold and congealed, and the wine's mediocrity disappointing. Folding up the empty, redolent burger paper and fries box, he glanced at the present Geraldine had given him, still unopened on the kitchen counter. He wasn't sure whether he'd saved it because it was his only gift, or because he didn't really care about it. Either way, he might as well open it now. He washed his greasy hands in the kitchen sink and poured another glass of wine. He picked up the gift and carefully untied the red ribbon, did his best not to tear the green paper as he picked at the tape, then slid the paper away. Not a tacky nothing after all, but a green, leather-bound book, like the ones his ex-wife had bought by the shelf-load from antiquaries to decorate their homes, curated for color and size rather than content. But this wasn't inert decoration. It was chosen for him to read. He snorted. Crime and punishment. He knew the gist of the story, though he suspected he'd have to read it to get the nuances she intended. Funny, he found himself looking forward to it. His doorbell rang, book in hand, still smiling with surprised respect for Geraldine. He answered the door to find the frazzled woman from across the hall. Hi, Jeb, right? Her grin was crooked, a little shy, infectious. He nodded, and she said, Marissa, you never responded to our invite to dinner for tomorrow evening. Can you make it? We'd be glad to have you. We're making turkey with all the fixings. A couple other neighbors are coming. He considered this only a moment, tasting the oily coating of his pitiful dinner as he licked his lips. You know what? Yes, Marissa. I'd be honored. Can I bring anything? Just yourself. She grinned again. 6 o'clock sharp, if that's okay, because of the Munchkin's early bedtime. Sure, he said, finding himself grinning in response. 6. Great. She glanced at his book, then inside the doorway at his near-bare apartment. Looks like a bookshelf is in order, huh? Maybe even a sofa. She laughed. He couldn't help but laugh with her. Yes, he said. It's time. Again, that soft, warm lightness pushing out something hard and heavy he hadn't even known was there. What was it? Only later, while lying on his second-hand mattress on the floor, after he'd read the long first part of the leather-bound book about young, impoverished Raskolnikov scheming and rationalizing his decision to murder a pawnbroker for her money, did it come to him. Like Raskolnikov, he'd lost something along the way, something essential and tender that had shriveled to a hard stone inside him once he began to drip Ponzi scheme money. Something poor little rich girl Marie Antoinette likely never knew her entire tragic gold-plated life. That night he dreamt again, a simple dream. The Marie Antoinette apartments remained an ugly pedestrian building, but he entered with lightness, that warmth down to his bones. He greeted neighbors in the lobby by name, delivered groceries to the housebound old lady down the hall, went into his simply but warmly furnished apartment to make himself a nourishing meal. Christmas morning, he leapt out of bed. If he was lucky, he might find gifts for the children across the hall before noon.